Foundation.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you can bring a lot of different perspectives to this film as the restoration executive producer, Edie of Manilatown Heritage Fund, a filmmaker yourself, so I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. Maybe we can start from your experience restoring this film. What was that like? Did it feel like you're breathing in new life into this film, or was it another sensation?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a part of a bigger intention for the Manilatown Heritage Foundation. First of all, the Manilatown Heritage Foundation is the steward and the culture bearer of the International Hotel and Historic Manilatown Legacies. We were the organization that was developed after the International Hotel Tenants Association. They ended, of course, with the eviction, and then they became the Manilatown Heritage Foundation. So one of the things that we wanted to do a couple of years ago is to actually tell our own story from our own perspective as a community, and we developed the beginning of our community-based archive. Thanks to the Andrew Mellon Foundation, which funded and supports community-based archives. Our first project was to take this iconic film and to bring it to the level of that it should be, because it was existing, a nearly 50-year-old film as a 16mm print. So we seeked out the most pristine version of the print at the UCLA archives. And again, with the help of the Mellon Foundation, was able to bring it to Burbank, to PhotoChem, which is really one of the best post-production houses in the country, to pop the color of it, to optimize the audio, because we actually had access to the original, the best versions of the quarter-inch tape that was recorded under. And then, because our first film festival was in California and it's required to have hard subtitle, we also were able to subtitle. And for me, this is the part that, in answer to your question, I ended up being the person who actually hand subtitled the event. It was really nothing that we can trust to a robot, an AI, and also to a professional transcriber, because we were talking about accents of our elders, a particular accent, an Ilocano accent, that is, you need to have the ear for it. And I'm actually an Ilocano American, so I was able to really hear carefully the stories of our, and the voices of our manongs. And the whole experience, I was constantly crying through this experience, because there was a depth that was coming out from their actual words that, if you had seen this film dozens of times like me, audio sort of like passes you by, and you think you heard what you heard, but when you really take the time to listen to the story, you might find out that what they said was much more poignant, and that was my experience. So it was very personal for me. As the executive director, it was my job to make sure that this happened, but on a personal level, it was important because, again, the manongs' stories were coming alive. It was Manilatown, it was the Filipino-American community of San Francisco that was translating that story. And I don't know if you noticed in the credits, but there was special thanks to the Ubungan, the Fred and Caroline Ubungan family, and that's actually my family. So my family I'm the fourth generation Filipino San Franciscan that has a relationship to this story. My great-grandparents came to San Francisco in 1904. If my grandfather had not married my grandmother, he would have been a Kearny Street Manong. He came in 1930 with his cousins to live on Kearny Street as teenagers, as part of the stoop labor that came from the Philippines. And then the next generation, my uncle and aunt, were part of the human chain. And then I was born into the situation that it made sense that I had to be the next generation that preserved the story. So a lot of personal, was in this particular restoration.
That's amazing. I can only imagine like the depth of emotion that you embarked on in such a personal journey and a personal story. When you bring such a personal process to a larger audience, like, what do you hope everyone else takes away from it?
What I hope, particularly for Asian Americans, and I mean that in the biggest, Canadian Americans, U.S. Americans, is that it's very important that we tell our story. We don't need benevolent outsiders to tell our story. That might have been needed when we didn't have the tools to do it ourselves a generation or two ago. But we have that ability now, and there is a comprehensiveness, there is a sensitivity that can be told through our own films and through our own voices that is much more real, and that's how I see it. The restoration had to come from community and future stories, like some of the great films that I'm happy, next week to be sharing the stage with when we have our talk, Hito Hata and Big Fight in Little China. It needs to be, in this generation, we need to tell the story. It's time. We can get the skill sets to tell our own story.
Wow, that's very inspiring.
Yeah.
I want to open up to audience questions, so start thinking of questions, if you want to ask one. I have one more first before opening it up. I know you're also a working filmmaker and working on a documentary about former activist tenants at the iHotel returning as residents. So do you want to talk about that, like what's coming up for you?
Sure, and this is an example of what I meant that, well, first of all, everything that's old is new again. That's the sad part about what's happening. We call it redevelopment. Gentrification is also, this issue today. And villages, ethnic villages are being lost, and we have to, as Americans, fight for these beautiful ethnic villages. But we also have another generation that has story, and in 2018, there were a handful in 1977 of young people, because you have to remember that this was a tenant-run movement. Again, no outsiders were allowed to be the leadership. You had to be a tenant of the International Hotel. So if you were a young person, not one of the elders, not one of the manongs, you would have to live in the iHotel. And some young people in their 20s, a lot of them college students, made a point of becoming tenants so they can be a part of the active movement. And one of the ways you can live in the new International Hotel, so again, I don't know if folks know, in 2005, we were able to rebuild the International Hotel senior residences. My organization actually runs right next to it a community-based museum that honors the legacy. So that the International Hotel, Manilatown Center, and the residences housing 106 seniors still exist now. But in 2018, the young people who had fought that battle when we reopened the wait list became qualified as low-income seniors to live in the iHotel. And Jeanette Lazam, who you saw with Wahat Tampo, walking out, she was one of the young, evicted tenants in 1977, and in 2021, we brought her back home. So, and in the course of like nearly 50 years, gosh, from being evicted to finally being able to be reinstated, she had lived this amazing life as a human rights activist. So Manilatown Manang is actually a documentary that the Manilatown Heritage Foundation is currently producing to tell her life story. And that's an example, I think, of how community needs to, we're telling the story that we feel we need to tell that the mainstream might not even know even exists. And we're helping our community to understand that there were young people that are now elders that were part of that movement. And there weren't a lot, but there were women as well. So as a female myself, I wanted to tell Jeanette Lazam's story. So fingers crossed we get that out into the world fairly soon. Manilatown Manang. Thank you for asking.
Yes, of course. Can't wait to see it. Does anyone have a question or? I wanted to ask you, I didn't know until I saw the end credit that you were also singing the song involved. Like, that's just another personal touch. And this person is about that.
Yeah, actually, my first, my real art is I'm a jazz musician, an ancestral Philippine music musician, and a composer. And that's how I usually have told my stories, for over a decade. But then I'm at a point in my life where all of the various types of media need to come together: direct storytelling, film, sound, to really tell the stories that are in my heart now. So that's what I originally am, is a musician, first and foremost, and now I'm a fledgling filmmaker. So Manilatown Manam will be my directorial debut, warts and all. So.
Yeah. This is just so stunning, and history that many of us don't know about and relate to in so many levels. What do you know about the original production? And if you can tell us a little about Curtis Choy, what his involvement and all the cinematographers. I see that it was a Pan-Asian sort of effort to tell the story.
Yes, and in the conversations that we're going to be having on August 3rd, yes, we are bringing Curtis Choy to, he's an elder now. He didn't want to travel from Portland where he's living, but yes, he was actually, for that time in 1977, really a maverick in filmmaking. It's like a lot of things that we take for granted now, like having a story just sort of like tell itself without narration and just let it live. That's like par for the course now. At that time, that was very almost radical, and also that he came into community to tell the story, and also at that time that the Asian American art activism was also birthed at that time. And so all of these artists representing, poetry, visual art, the media, they came together to help make this film. Curtis was the director, but so much was donated with love from a variety of, media artists that, if you are filmmakers, you probably these are like amazing veterans that donated their time and contributed to this film. And Curtis can talk more about that. The other thing too, which is interesting because it parallels activism, is that it is also a story about the longevity of struggle. And that's one of the things as an activist that one has to understand, that it doesn't become solved. It's your whole lifetime. It's many generations of like continuing the fight that people who don't have a voice, that you need to be there, you need to keep yourself healthy, you have to be prepared for the long haul, and you don't know where it's gonna go, you just know that you're gonna have to fight that fight. This film was a 10-year film. At the time that you're seeing a lot of that footage, we were seeing Manilatown, get whittled away. We had no idea how it was gonna end. So he actually stuck it out as a filmmaker. He's incredible. 10 years before he started filming to when the eviction finally happened, because the eviction was a 10-year movement for some folks who don't realize that. And the film was also a 10-year art piece. I don't know what one has to say about that, except that that's sort of like the story of indie filmmaking too. When I told Curtis, oh my God, it's like we're making all the film festivals in 2023 with the restoration, and also, by the way, it's 40th anniversary because it first came out in 1983. He told me this interesting, fact. He said, when I was in New York back in '83 trying to find distribution and not having much luck, a former, a professor of his said, the secret of being an indie filmmaker is to live a long life, because they might recognize you 30 years later. And that's exactly what seems to happen. So I wanted to share that. We had a good laugh about that. We're the stewards of his film as well, as well as the history, and we are his distributors of this film. So we work very closely with him. I encourage you to listen to the program. You will hear his voice directly, and I believe that we're opening it up to Q&A during that program too.
Right.
Yes, we are. It's going to be live streamed on Twitch and Facebook, and people can add their questions in the comments, but we will surface it with the rest of the team.
So when's Curtis coming to? I'm an old friend of Curtis's, and also I'm an old friend of Al Robles, and I used to live at the I Hotel.
What's your name, sir?
George Leo.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh yeah, I know your name because we have the name of the event.
And I helped paint that mural up and blah,
Yes,
blah.
yes.
I'm an old timer, but I don't see myself as old or Curtis. But yeah, when's he coming to town?
He's not coming to town. You know, it's really interesting because we've gotten lots of film festival acceptance, you know, through this year, and he goes, I'm retired. I am so retired. I'm here in Portland. That's it. If there's a virtual program, I'm there. And so that's what. So he won't be here, but virtually he will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
He's enjoying his retirement.
I'll try to reach him in Portland.
Yes.
Thanks.
Hi, yes. So I'm a student filmmaker myself, but I remember you mentioned that this film was sort of a collaboration of various artists and art forms, including poetry. And I was curious about that poem towards the end.
Yes.
Like who wrote it and kind of, yeah, like how it made its way into the film.
The wonderful activist poet Al Robles, who is also in the film and narrating a great deal of it, wrote that poem. Yes.
That's cool.
Yes, it is. and also that's, again, for that time that was quite revolutionary to approach a documentary film like that. We accept this, you know, all the time now, but I think that young filmmakers have to realize that Curtis Choy was really, you know, radical in his filmmaking and making new strides, and even for Asian Americans to even express their own voice and have a story. All of that was brave and fresh and new. Yeah.
It still feels that way watching it now.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Oh, Jessica Hagedorn has a question.
Right here. Sorry. We'll do two. Right after.
I just want to say hello to George Leung. Turn around, George. Right here, man.
Hey!
Okay, George was the reason I went to the I Hotel back in the day, because he ran the poetry workshop. And George invited me to bring my broke-ass poems to the workshop in the old building. And that's how we all got involved. And it's amazing to see you, man. I've been wondering where you are.
Yeah, well.
And he's been in New York as well.
In New York. And by the way, it's a wonderful restoration. I want to thank you for this great presentation.
And I do want to introduce everybody, not only, of course, to George Leung, but Jessica Hagedorn, who is so, you know, I can't even say she's a writer, she's everything, musician, writer, everything, and so much an important part of our communities.
Well, my original question was, are you aware if any iHotel residents will see the film? And now that we know we have some present, I guess I'd just love to hear, like, how do you feel seeing it and reflecting on your time there?
Put all the microphones.
Are we going to start singing now?
I guess the question was, how do you feel?
How do you feel having seen the film again?
Oh, yeah. A lot of memories. Standing in front, I was behind the barricades when they came.
Yes.
And I remember there was a small person right in front of me. She was getting crushed. And all I can hear say is, I can't breathe. Because they're just, so we had to cut them. But, yeah, I mean, I brought some tears in my eyes there, you know, so.
Yeah, and I think all of you realize too, by seeing this footage, people put their bodies on the line to take care of people. And that's huge. I mean, there was injury, there was, like, you know, force, you know, and
yeah, they didn't show the horses coming and pushing the people.
yeah,
Trying
that the horses, yeah, I mean, they brought horses to push people out. They used sledgehammers to break down doors, and they used batons to, like, dig into people. It's always emotional for me to see that. And George, it's really an honor to meet you, and Jessica, it's been wonderful meeting you as well. Did you want to add a little something to that.
Well, I thought it was quite profound to see, well, there's that glimpse of George on the street when all the stuff starts, and it's a fleeting glimpse, but there he is, and I did not know he was sitting right there. And then Norman Gio, who I was telling you I just went to visit in May, and he doesn't know who I am anymore, but he lives in the hotel now, and you're all taking care of him. And that whole struggle was so personal to him and to Al and to every poet and human being who got involved, of course. So many artists and so many just regular people who wanted. It's very emotional. And I feel like I've never seen it, or I've seen it so many times. I told you, this really kills me. And I just, he's so eloquent and such a beautiful man. And just outraged, but still so kind, and America's not cruel and all this. And then I was also thinking about the sheriff, Hongisto, and what a Shakespearean tragic character he is to have gone to jail. I remember that. They jailed him because he didn't want to do it. And then there he is with a sledgehammer. And you're just thinking, the irony of all of this is just so deep, And anyway, kudos to all of you. I'm so happy you brought this film back to life, and it's such an important film, and that there's so many young people here who, ask these questions and don't know the history as well as perhaps some of us do, or we just lived through it, and now I hope it can reach more and more people, and the conversation can continue.
The conversation can continue, and one thing I do want to tell the young people is that we are in interesting times right now in which there was always violence against Asians and our elders in particular, but now almost much more prevalent or in our visual now. It's important for you to know, though, that this film shows that you come from warrior stock. We are not victims. We are not helpless in this situation. We have always fought, and people that you thought in particular looked like your grandparents were some badass warriors. So you come from that, and so don't let anyone think that we are sitting here and taking it when our elders are being hurt, and that we have no history of fighting back against that. You come from that stock.
The conversation will continue August 3rd, the online panel. Check it out. I think we're out of time. Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you for being a wonderful audience.